the idea of sustainability is very important. First, we have to be sure we understand what we mean by sustainability, which is living our lives as a society in a way that doesn't adversely affect the lives of future generations. So is it possible? Yes, but it is very difficult. It'll take a philosophical change in the way we live in order to achieve the sustainability. It's not as simple as saying whether they hinder or not hinder. Businesses have an additional layer of complexity to them, which is profit. They're not charities. They're there to make money for themselves. They're there to make money for their shareholders. And sustainability comes at a cost. So they balance. They have to balance this idea of what it costs to attain sustainability versus how much it detracts from the profit that they make for themselves, for their shareholders. So do they hinder it? Do they hinder it? The profit motive hinders because the sustainability comes at a cost. And we have to factor that into our thinking, that sustainability is not cheap. The issue of sustainability with companies and whether they have unsafe practices, one can say yes, one can say no. My opinion is this, my opinion is that. So it is very important to say, give a specific example. Without a specific example, then we just devolve into the area of opinions, and opinions are what they are. So let me give you an example, a very current example. And you can decide whether there's an unsafe practice or whether there are other variables that one needs to consider. And let me read to you something that was in the New York Times. In the New York Times, dated December 3rd, 2003, the title of the article was, U.S. proposes easing rules on emissions of mercury. This is a very current problem as well. Currently, mercury emissions from coal-burning power plants are not yet regulated under federal law. These power plants release about 48 tons of mercury into the air each year, or about 40% of the total human-caused mercury emissions in the country. The upcoming regulations have been the subject of intense lobbying by utilities that argue the rules would force them to switch to more expensive fuels or install costly equipment on power plants to reduce the amount of mercury being spewed into the air. In a nutshell, there's the issue. You see, the power plants produce a very valuable commodity. You know how valuable it is in the cold of winter, how much you need the power to warm your home. But they are engaged in an unsafe practice, the emission of mercury. On the other hand, they say that it's costly to live in what would be a sustainable world, which is to not have the mercury emissions. If you were to regulate mercury in an overly inflexible way, the result would be substantial fuel switching from coal to natural gas, said a spokesman for the utilities. The Clean Air Act is flexible and pragmatic enough to have different reservoirs or authority for dealing with mercury, said the spokesman. Under the proposal submitted to the White House last week, and remember this is 2003, power plants would be able to buy and sell the rights to emit mercury into the air. The similar trading of emission credits is currently in use to handle sulfur dioxide, the pollutant that's a component of the acid rain. This was written December 2003. This all was decided just this past month, February 2008. In an article online, CBS News, it says, a federal appeals court struck down a Bush administration policy which would have allowed some power plants to exceed legal emission levels of mercury. The three-judge court unanimously struck down the cap-and-trade policy and the EPA's plan to exempt coal and oil-fired power plants from regulations requiring strict emissions control technology to block emissions. So, do they engage in unsafe practices? The power plants? Yes. Should they? No. But what are they doing? They're doing something valuable. They're heating your home. They're keeping you warm. The result of the judge's ruling is that it's probably going to cost you more if it forces the power plants to put in more expensive, sustainable technology. Is that a good thing or it's a bad thing? You decide. It's going to cost you. That's the essence of the problem. I have always felt that they should be held accountable. Sadly, as you get older, which some people tell me I have, you gain a sense of history. So again, sadly, I was there paying attention to the news when the Superfund issue first came online. And the thought was, companies pollute, the environment is polluted, who should pay? The companies or the government? I.e., the companies or you, the taxpayer. The Superfund was eventually set up because the decision was made it'd be difficult to get the companies to do it, so you're paying for it. There where your taxes go. Superfund was set up, the cleanup was instituted by the government. Government has its money, but the money is from your pocket. Is that good? Is it bad? I've always felt, even at the outset, it's the companies that should pay because the companies are the ones that made the profit from it. But the decision was made, higher priority is being placed on removing the pollutants. We've got to get this job done, which is true, and we are willing to pay. Is it good? Is it bad? All I've given you are the facts. To me, the companies should be paying 100%, but there are reasons why it can't be done, and so we're getting the job done in this way. You're talking to someone who in the earliest days believed that that government is best that governs least. Almost a libertarian, not quite in my younger years, but to think that, yes, that the government should not be involved, that the free market should operate in any way that it wishes, and free market controls would work on their own. Well, again, the issue of age. Gee, I hate to harp on that. No, I have all sorts of really cool albums. I still listen to I know what's going on nowadays, but no, the sense of history is overwhelming at times, and I now believe, especially when it comes to environmental issues, without a strong government presence, it's not going to work. It's just not going to work. We saw the counter issues raised by the power industry. Every company raises these counter issues. You will always get the issue of, well, if we have to pay for it, it's going to cost jobs, and the jobs are going to go overseas, and the American economy will be hurt. I'm not saying that's not a valid argument, but I am saying that it's not clear to me that companies will put the environment first and foremost in their considerations. I do believe the government will. I do believe a strong EPA is an important need for our country. Gosh, there's only one way that can be done. It's the power of money. The American consumer controls an enormous amount of money. And if we as a whole wanted a certain thing to be done, we most certainly could get it done. How? Through boycott. Boycott. If you're not happy with the way Exxon handled the Valdez crisis, if you're perturbed by the fact that there's still oil there, that the rocks on the beach in Alaska look nice and shiny, but if you pick up a rock underneath it, you still see the oil that covers the beach. If you're not happy with that, boycott Exxon. Don't buy their gas. As you drive, go to Chevron. Go to Shell. Is it better? I don't know. What I do know is, if you're not happy with Exxon, boycott Exxon. If you're not happy with guns, boycott guns. Boycott Walmart. Boycott. Use the power of your purse to get things done. We're very effective when we want to. Oftentimes, though, we don't want to. It's a bother, it's a strain, we've got other things to do. We have to draw the line somewhere. So, yes, we can. Will we is another question.